By the second week, Mara could tell where the hungry towns were without seeing a single person. The roads got quieter, the ditches filled with abandoned cars, and the air carried a certain stillness, like a house after an argument. They moved at night and hid by day, but even night travel wasn't invisible anymore. Too many people were learning the same lesson. Main roads were watched, bridges became choke points, gas stations, even empty ones, became meeting places for the wrong kind of men. Mara and Eli didn't talk much while they walked. Talking made you sloppy. Talking made you feel like the world was normal enough for conversation. But they communicated constantly anyway. A hand signal, a head tilt, a pause that meant, listen. Eli's cheek had swollen from the punch he took behind the diner. The cut wasn't bad, but it was a marker. It made Mara's stomach tighten every time she looked at him. Their mother's first aid training kept it clean. Their father's training kept them moving. On the 12th night, they reached the outskirts of a small town they'd marked on the map as a possible pivot point, not because it had supplies, because it had a National Guard facility nearby. Eli had remembered it from a childhood road trip. Dad pointed it out, Eli said, voice low. He said, if the country ever breaks, places like that become magnets. Magnets, Mara thought, for the prepared and for the desperate. They didn't go into town. They stayed in the tree line, watching from a rise. Below them, the town was darker than it should have been. Only a few lights burned. A fire barrel glowed outside a building with boarded windows. Mara lifted binoculars they'd scavenged from a sporting goods store days earlier. The building by the fire barrel had a handmade sign. Community Food Line, tomorrow, 9 a.m. A line already formed outside it, even though it was midnight. People wrapped in blankets, people sitting on the sidewalk, a mother with a baby pressed to her chest. Mara lowered the binoculars. "That's starvation," she whispered. Eli's jaw tightened. "That's the beginning of it." Mara's eyes moved farther down the street. Two men stood near the line, not waiting, watching. One held a bat like it was a cane. The other leaned against a car, arms crossed, scanning the crowd with a practiced calm. Mara felt her skin go cold. They weren't there to help. They were there to see who was weak enough to take from. "Pack predators," Eli murmured. Mara nodded. "And they're patient." They turned away from town and followed the old service road that led toward the facility. The National Guard Armory sat beyond a low ridge, fenced and dark. From a distance, it looked like a plain industrial building, a warehouse, a place that used to belong to the normal world. Now it looked like something else, a prize. They watched for a long time. No lights, no vehicles coming or going, no obvious guards. But Mara didn't trust obvious anymore.
"Nothing is unguarded," she whispered. Eli nodded. "Sometimes the guard is the people who'll show up if they hear you." They waited until the night was at its deepest point, when even the insects seemed quieter. They moved closer, staying low, keeping distance from open ground. Mara's heart beat hard, not from fear of the building, from fear of what the building represented. Crossing this line meant admitting the world had changed enough that they needed to be armed like their father had always expected. Eli stopped near the tree line and looked at Mara. His voice was barely audible. "We don't take more than we can carry," he said. Mara nodded. "We don't make ourselves a target." Eli added, "And we don't do anything we can't live with." Mara looked at him. He still had that freshman softness around the edges, but his eyes were older now. "Okay," she whispered. They moved in. They did not cut fences or smash doors. They looked for what the world had already broken. A service gate stood slightly open, hanging crooked on its hinge. Someone had been here before. That meant two things. There might be less to take, and there might be someone still nearby. They slipped through the gap and moved toward the building, scanning for movement. Eli's headlamp stayed off. Moonlight was enough. They found a side access door that had been forced at some point. The metal around the latch was bent. It didn't hang open, but it wasn't sealed either. Mara held her breath and listened. Nothing. Eli eased it open with slow pressure. The door gave with a faint creak that sounded loud in the night. They froze. Waited. Still, nothing. Inside, the air smelled like dust and cold metal. Rows of storage racks rose like skeletons. Their footsteps were careful, quiet. Mara's mind raced through what their father had taught them, lessons disguised as camping tips, as stories, as just in case. He had always said that knowledge was a weapon too, and that the best weapon was the one you understood. Eli moved toward a storage area, his eyes scanning labels, his fingers tracing boxes as if reading Braille. "Here," he whispered. Mara came close. They didn't talk about what they found in detail. The specifics didn't matter to the story of them getting home. What mattered was the choice. They selected only what they could handle, not what looked impressive, not what made them feel powerful, what made them capable. They took 2 reliable firearms and enough basic ammunition to defend themselves, plus a few practical items that mattered more than people realized. Cleaning supplies, spare batteries, a basic sling, ear protection, a small kit for maintenance. Eli's hands moved with a steady competence that didn't come from obsession. It came from familiarity. Their father had taught them safe handling like it was a ritual, like it was respect. Mara felt her stomach twist as she strapped the weight into her pack. The metal was cold against her back. This wasn't a fantasy now. This was a responsibility. They started to leave, and then Mara heard it. A faint click, not mechanical, not inside the building, outside. A sound like a boot shifting on gravel. Mara's entire body went still.
Eli's eyes met hers. They didn't speak. Mara lifted one finger. Listen. Another sound. A soft murmur. A man's voice. Then another. Multiple. Mara's throat went dry. They hadn't been alone. They never were. Eli angled his head toward a rear service corridor, a way out. Mara nodded. They moved, slow and controlled, keeping their bodies close to shelves, using shadow and structure. The voices outside got closer. Mara caught a few words through the thin metal of the building. "Told you it'd still have stuff. Quiet, we don't want trouble. If someone's here, we take it. Pack predators, but careful ones. The first group evolving." Mara felt anger rise like heat, then forced it down. Anger made you loud. They reached the rear corridor. A small exit door stood at the end, leading to a loading area. Eli eased in open. The cold air hit them. They slipped out and moved along the side of the building, keeping low. Behind them, the front door clanged. The men were inside now. Mara's pulse hammered. They were out, but not safe. They had to clear the perimeter without being seen. They moved toward the fence line. Then a flashlight beam swept across the loading area. Mara froze behind a dumpster. Eli crouched beside her, breathing controlled. The beam moved closer. A man's silhouette appeared at the corner of the building. He wasn't rushing. He was hunting. Mara felt the pistol's weight in her pack like a heartbeat. The man stepped forward, beam swinging. The light hit Eli's shoe. For a split second, everything locked. The man's head snapped toward them. "Hey!" he shouted. Mara moved first, not firing, moving. She grabbed Eli's sleeve and pulled him hard toward the fence gap they'd used earlier. They ran now because the quiet option was gone. The man shouted again. Footsteps pounded behind them. Another voice joined. 2 sets, 3. Mara's lungs burned. Eli's pack thumped against his back with heavy rhythm. They reached the fence gap. Eli shoved through first.
Mara followed. A hand grabbed her strap from behind. Mara twisted, swung her elbow back hard into whoever had grabbed her. A grunt. The strap tore free.
She stumbled forward and kept running. Didn't stop until they were deep in the brush where moonlight couldn't find them. They dropped behind a fallen log, breathing hard. Mara pressed her hand to her forearm. Pain. She looked down. Her sleeve was torn, and blood ran from a shallow gash where something had scraped her. Wire, metal, maybe a knife's edge in the chaos. Eli's voice came fast. "You hit?" Mara nodded. "Not bad." Eli looked at her arm anyway, eyes tight. Mara pulled out her first aid kit, hands shaking now that the danger had passed. She cleaned the cut quickly, grimacing at the sting, then wrapped it. Eli's breathing slowed. "They didn't see what we took," he whispered. Mara stared into the dark trees. "They saw us," she said. "That's enough." They waited there for a long time, listening for pursuit, hearing none. But the night felt different now. They had become a rumor. 2 kids with packs who slipped into an armory and came out armed. That rumor could spread, and rumors traveled fast in a broken world. Mara looked at Eli. "We move farther off the grid," she said. Eli nodded. "No towns for a while." They traveled until dawn, pushing through wet fields and shallow creek beds, walking where their footprints would be erased. By morning, they found a hidden spot in a stand of thick pine. They built no fire. They drank measured sips of water. They ate cold food and didn't complain. Eli fell asleep first this time, exhaustion taking him hard. Mara stayed awake, watching the light filter through needles. She thought about the 2 categories of rulers her father had warned them about. The loud ones, strong in groups, willing to steal and oppress, and the quiet ones, strong in skill, strong in small teams, able to thrive without needing to crush anyone. Mara had always thought those were just 2 kinds of people. Now she saw they were becoming 2 kinds of power, and power always tried to grow. In the following days, they saw more signs of it. A road sign spray-painted with a symbol, 3 slashes like claw marks, and the words "Toll Road." An abandoned rest stop with bodies under tarps, no police, no investigation, just absence. A farmhouse with smoke coming from the chimney and armed men posted on the porch, not as defense, but as warning. Mara and Eli avoided them all. They moved like ghosts. When they did have to enter a town for water, they did it before dawn, when even predators slept, and they left before sunrise. On the 20th night, they found a small cabin deep in state forest land. It looked abandoned, but not destroyed. Mara didn't trust that. They watched it from the trees for an hour. No movement, no lights, no smoke. Finally, they approached carefully. Inside, they found dust, a broken chair, and a half-empty pantry with stale flour and canned beans. Someone had been there months ago, not recently. They ate the beans cold, grateful anyway. Eli sat with his back to the wall, the firearm laid across his lap, his eyes half open. Mara cleaned her arm again, checking for infection. She was lucky. It looked clean. But luck didn't last forever. Eli's voice was quiet. "We're becoming what Dad made us." Mara looked at him. He didn't sound angry. He sounded sad. Mara nodded. "He didn't make us this," she said. "He just made sure we wouldn't die surprised." Eli stared at the cabin's cracked ceiling. "Do you think," he asked, "that people in packs realize what they're doing?" Mara thought of the men outside the armory. Not starving, not desperate, organizing, smiling. I think they tell themselves they're doing what's necessary, she said, and they stop caring who pays for it. Eli's jaw tightened. And the quiet ones? Mara looked at the wrapped cut on her arm. She thought of Jonah in the library, the note she'd left him. She thought of the line outside the food distribution building. I think the quiet ones keep paying, she said, until they decide they won't. Eli looked at her. What happens then? He asked. Mara answered with the truth that scared her most. Then the gates get built again, she said, or they never do. They slept in the cabin in shifts. Mara dreamed of home again. This time, the house was dark. The front door hung open, and the wind moved through it like a stranger. She woke before dawn with her heart racing. Eli was already awake, staring toward the window. I had one too, he whispered. Mara swallowed. About home? Eli nodded. They didn't say more. They didn't need to. The compass in Eli's chest was pulling harder now, as if home itself was calling or warning. At dusk, they packed and moved again. They were closer now, still far, but the miles were shrinking. And with every mile, Mara felt the world tightening. Not because the land changed, because the people did. The predators were learning. The quiet survivors were learning too. Sooner or later, those two kinds of strength would collide. Mara adjusted the straps on her pack and felt the cold weight settle against her back. Eli stepped beside her. Next stretch is the hardest, he said. Mara nodded. The middle is always the hardest. Eli's eyes held hers in the dim light. We make it home, he said. Mara nodded once, sharp and certain. We make it home, she agreed. And then they disappeared into the night again.
We hope you enjoyed the story. There's more to come. Subscribe down below. These stories are written by us, helped by AI, and then we put it all together and bring it to you. Stay tuned for the next story coming your way.